Okay folks, we have completed the HTML and CSS parts of this little project. We only have one more section to do before we've finished creating a client-side version of our address book. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to simply start up VS Code. Now VS Code should of course open up straight into your address book folder with the last file you were editing. Alright, so we have this form. Now traditionally when you post a form, or if you use the default get as its method, then what it actually does is refreshes this page, and that way you can grab these elements here, the different inputs and things like that, in some way in this page, and then do something with them. Now we're going to do something slightly different to that, so we don't actually want it to refresh the page when we post. What we want it to do is stay right here. So we're going to capture.
Can you please come to student services? Please come to student services straight away. Thank you.
We are going to capture the onSubmit event for this form. Now this is an interesting thing. If I put in the JavaScript return false here and save it, then I go down and start my live server, just as we've been doing. So now our form is active and we're able to use it and everything, but it will not submit to itself by refreshing this page. So if I put in a name, John Jones is my favourite name to use. I don't need an address, suburb, postcode, email or phone. I can just hit add friend. I think postcode might require something, but we'll find out. So if I just hit add friend, you'll see that this up here on the address line, you won't see it refresh. Okay, it will simply stay there. So it looks like it's broken, but it's not. This is what the return false. I'll actually take that out just so that you can, I'll actually take that out just so that you can see what the default is. So if I cut that out of there and save it, this time if I put in John Jones, we're going to hit add friend. You'll watch this whole page refresh. It might happen very quickly, but it refreshes. There it goes. Oops, something went wrong as well. But that's okay, we're not too worried about that. Alright, so let's put that back in there. onSubmit return false. But we don't want to actually return false directly here. We want to actually send it to a piece of JavaScript that's going to assemble the information we put into our address book and is going to display that in our list panel. If you remember over here under my friends. So instead of return false, we're actually going to run a JavaScript function. I'm going to call it add friend. Now what we want to do is get a reference to the form. So because this is being run inside the form tag, I can use a special JavaScript keyword of this. It means this element on the page. This element refers to the form element because this is a parameter of the form element. So now I'm passing across a reference to the form, which means I can get access to anything inside the form, which is what I want. Now add friend isn't defined anywhere here, so we need to actually write an add friend function. I'm going to save this. Nothing will happen over on the page. But here I've got my address book. I'm putting all my styles here in a styles folder. So on the address book level, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it scripts. Inside the scripts folder, notice how it's next to the styles folder, not inside, so be very careful of that. Inside the scripts folder, I'm going to create a main.js JavaScript file. And the first thing I'm going to do in this JavaScript file is create a function called add friend. So the way I create functions these days is the new version, ES6 plus. Add friend equals no parameters at the moment, arrow, and then curly braces. And this is where all the action's going to happen. Now, I've got no parameters inside here, but of course over in index.html I am sending it a parameter, a reference to the form. So in main.js I'm going to grab that reference to the form and I'm going to put it into a variable called the form. And the last thing I want to happen inside this function is that return false that we tried out before. So it'll do everything else, and then the last statement in here is going to be return false, which means it's going to stop the form from refreshing the page. All right, I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back over to index.html. We're calling add friend here. It's going to bring it up from here, but before it does, we have to connect it. All right, this page knows nothing about our main.js page yet. Traditionally, we put that up into the head section just like we did this style sheet, but in the last 10 years or so, we've been doing it slightly differently. We actually want every element on this page to render on the screen, to actually be shown before we get any interactivity from JavaScript. And so these days, it's actually more common to go right to the bottom of your page, and just before the body tag, we're going to put in a script tag. Now we're not going to write script here, we're simply going to give it a source reference, src equals, and now I've got this file down in a scripts folder, so if I start to type scripts, it should come up. VS Code's rather clever, and it's already looked in the scripts folder and found that we only have one JS file in there to deal with, so I'm just going to click on that one. All right, we've now connected this back to our JS, and so we're ready to start writing our JavaScript for the index.html. I've just forgotten to save that, so let's jump back here. At the moment, all it's doing is stopping the form from submitting. Of course, if I jump over to here and I do the same thing, John Jones, and hit add friend, it shouldn't be refreshing. Whoops, it is, and I've realized why that is. That was right, 5500. Now, for this to actually work, I realized that I have made a small mistake up here where it says on submit equals add friend. I actually have to say return the value of add friend. Remember, add friend itself is going to return false, so this is the same as what we had before, return false. And so if I save that, jump across to my web browser, and I type in John Jones, that should have the same effect. It shouldn't be refreshing the page, and it should just be sitting there with John Jones still there. All right, let's go and create our JavaScript. Into main.js, and everything we do now is going to be done before this return false. So I'm going to push it down a couple of lines and start here. I'll throw some comments in here because comments are very useful when you're doing procedural code like this. Less so when you're doing HTML and CSS. Can be a bit useful in CSS, but the comments we use here are single line comments. So you just put 2 forward slashes, and the first thing we're going to do is get a reference to the name field in the form. Now, the reason we're doing that is we want to do extra things with the name field on its own. Remember how we made it autofocus? Well, when we finish with our JavaScript, we're going to focus back on the name field. So we need a reference to the field itself, not just the value inside. And so for the rest of the fields, we're actually going to simply grab the value inside. So let's make that our next step. Get the data from the form. Okay, now you remember we sent a reference over using this command to the form. So the variable that picked up on that is the form. So to get a reference to the name field, all we have to do is we have to say const name field equals the form dot name. Oops, it tried to autocomplete for me. Okay, now the form here is this form here, so it's getting the reference to the form. It's going and finding the name inside the form. This name field is just a name that I've made up myself, so you could call it anything. But name field seems to make sense. All right, to get the data, whoops. To get the data from the name field, we're going to make a new variable called name, and we can use that name field dot value to get whatever they've typed in there. And it's the dot value that gives us the John Joneses, the 12 whatever strings. So we can continue address equals the form dot address dot value, and just grab the values of each of the other form elements. Now remember, we want name field to be a little special, so we get the reference to the actual field itself and then we grab its value, but these ones we could just grab the value directly. So this is identical for all of the rest. I'm going to show you a little quick way of working this out. I'm going to control this, control C it. I'm going to start pasting it. So I've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have to paste it 5 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if I double click on this address, see how it's highlighting address, but it highlights all the other addresses? If I press Control D, it will highlight the second copy. Now if I press Control D again, it'll keep sort of highlighting them sequentially from where I started. I don't quite want that, I want just these two. And if I now type suburb, it will change both of those two at the same time. Double click on address, Control D, by the way, it's Command D for those using Macs. And we want postcode. Double click address again. This time we want, whoops, I forgot to do my Control D, didn't I? Let's Control Z that. Let's try that again. Control D, email. Double click address, Control D to get the next one, and we want phone. I feel like I'm missing one. Name, address, suburb, postcode, email, phone. Name, address, suburb, postcode, email, phone. Nope, just made too many. Okay, so now we have all the data here in JavaScript in these variables here. Name, address, they're constant variables, they don't change throughout this function. Name, address, suburb, postcode, email and phone. Nice simple names for them. Again, these names are all made up. You can make them different, but I don't know why you would. So the next thing we need to do is we need to create a friend panel for each of these. Now, if you remember in the CSS, we actually did some CSS on this imaginary friend panel. So we're actually going to make the friend panel that that CSS applies to. Now, we're going to do this programmatically, meaning I'm going to make another variable called friend panel. And the way we make them is, there's a couple of different ways to do it. We could simply put HTML into a variable and then just present that. But this is more programmatic. We're using the language to do it. Create element. And the element we want to create is a div. The next thing we can do is give it a class name. And this is the same as making a div class equals friend panel. Now we did friend panel this way because that's CSS standard. So we just made a div and we've given it a class of friend panel. Now I mentioned a moment ago that we can actually just add add data to the friend panel. We could just actually write directly into the friend panel. And so that's what I'm going to do here, just as an example. So you've got two different ways of doing it, all programmatically, or we can just write straight HTML into the inner HTML, it's called, of this div, the stuff inside this div. So I'm going to go friend panel dot inner HTML equals. I'm going to break this up over a number of lines, and I'm going to use what we call JavaScript template strings. Now, JavaScript template strings are denoted by what's called the backtick. Now, this is different to an apostrophe, and this can be found right underneath your escape key. So when you type it, it knows you want to put two of them, so it automatically puts two of them, and we're working between them. I'm going to press enter. I'm then going to go up to the end of that line and press enter again. So everything I'm typing now, tab it over, everything I'm typing now is going to go inside these two backticks. And you'll see why that's important in a moment. Okay, let's make an H2. Oops, I forgot while we're doing this in JavaScript. Good old VS Code won't be able to interpret using Emmet. All right, now we want to include the variable name. And to do that in a template string, JavaScript template string, we put name inside a dollar curly brace like that. And you can see how the color of that has changed to be the same color as this. So that's suggesting to you this is actually a piece of JavaScript that I'm putting inside this text. Now that's quite handy. We're going to then make a paragraph. Now inside this paragraph, I'm going to put address, followed by a comma. Whoops, forgot to close the brace. And then I'm going to put in suburb, close the brace, comma, Q for Queensland. You can leave that out if you allowed postcodes outside of the 4,000s, and postcode. So that's going to present their full address, suburb and postcode in one line. I'm going to do another P. Oops. And inside here we're going to have their email address. And a last P. And we're going to have their phone. Now while we're doing this, I'm going to add one more thing. We're going to add a button. And we're going to delete this friend if they're no longer a friend. Now I'm not going to actually write the JavaScript code to delete them, because that's not our point. Our point is to head through to the MySQL database, and that way it'll be stored permanently, and this delete button then can take them out of that database and refresh the screen. We'll see how that works later on. But we'll have the button there so you can see what it's going to look like. We just won't be making it work in JavaScript because that's not our purpose. All right, next thing we're going to do, oops, I'm still inside that template string, aren't I? It's easy to do. We're going to get a reference to the, I forgot what we called it. Let's go have a look. That second panel. Here it is, the My Friends div. So what we want to do is put each of these panels we create inside this. And so let's go to the My Friends div. And again, constant variable, My Friends document dot query selector, not explain that in a second. And we're going to put something in there to say what we're selecting. Now this is the new way to grab from the document, this being the document of course, specific things. And we can use any selector we like. For instance, if I want to grab a reference to the form, I can just say form. I could have done that instead of passing the form across. If I want to get a reference to the whole body of it, I could use the body tag. If I want to get a reference to something that has a class of friend panel, I could do dot friend panel. And JavaScript's smart enough to realize that when you precede it with a dot, you're talking about a class. Well, similarly, it's smart enough to realize that if you precede it with a hash, which is an ID, and make it the hashtag my friends, I'm now going to get a reference to this thing here that we have ID'd as my friends. So now that's pointing, my friends is now pointing to the div. And we could actually just throw our new panel in as in an HTML, or we can add the friend panel to the list by simply going my friends append child. So this time we're again programmatically using JavaScript rather than just straight writing to the HTML. We're going to append, which means to put on the end of, append. We're going to append this as a child of my friends. Oops, Amy's friends. Not sure who Amy is. Okay, we're pretty much done there, but it's not going to be pretty. So I'm going to save all that. I'm going to go back over to my browser and I'm actually going to do a shift refresh just to make sure. Sometimes if you just do a straight refresh, it won't pick up changes in external files like our main JS or our main CSS. So if you do a shift refresh, it goes and refreshes all files. So just to make sure, let's go John Jones. This time let's actually put some stuff in, whatever, street. Yep, I spelled it right, didn't I? 4209, email jjones@outlook.com, and his phone is 0432 123 456, of course. This time I'm going to intercept the add friend submission of this form with my JavaScript. The JavaScript will assemble a panel and it should appear here if everything went well, which it does. Do you want to remember this? No, I don't. And so you can see the H2, the paragraphs that we put in, and that delete button, all sitting inside that friend panel. Okay, that's exactly what we're after. The only problem is, this is dirty. So ideally when we hit add friend, we put them into our list. We should be clearing all of these. And then we should set the focus back to the first element. So let's go ahead and do that. Jump back into VS Code. After we've added our friend panel, we don't care about that data anymore. So next thing to do is to clear the form. Now I could just go through and go, the form.address equals .value equals blank, blah, blah, blah. But there's a nice programmatic way of doing this, and that's what we're going to be doing. So first thing I need is a reference to all the elements in the form. So I'm going to go const elements. Again, you can use any name there. EL if you don't feel like typing. The form dot elements. Now this element is very important. That is an array or a list of all of the elements inside the form. So this is now going to contain an array of all the elements in the form. We're going to do a for loop, and we're going to make it a simple one. Let x equal 0, x less than the length of elements, x plus plus. I'll explain that real quick just in case you haven't come across for loops before. It's going to start a counter x at 0. It's going to go up to just less than the length of this array that we just created. And each time it's going to, x plus plus is the incrementer, it's going to add 1 to x. So it'll start out at 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I think we've got 6, did we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is going to go through all 6 of those elements. It'll actually go through 7 because the button we got at the bottom is also an element, but we don't want to clear its value. We'll guard against that in a second. Now why is it less than the length? If this number is going to be 7, why is it less than? Because we start counting at 0. In computing, 0 is a perfectly valid integer, and so we use it for all of our count loops. So if we start at 0, we want to keep this stopping condition, I guess it is, while x is less than 7. So it'll go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is 7 elements. Give it some curly braces to work with. Now we only want to clear it if it's a text field, or a number field, I should point out. So we're going to say if elements outside of x dot type is text. Now elements was an array. The way we access each element inside our list of elements is using this index, we call it. So it's going to start with 1, then it'll be 2, then it'll be 3, then it'll be 4, etc. right up to 6. Then we want to get the type of that element. So this is JavaScript keyword. The type of the element is going to be text or number. So over here, if we look at it, of course, we've got type equals text, type equals text. Now we made this one type equals number, so we have to account for that. So at the end of that line, I want you to put a space and 2 vertical bars. Now these are the key. You have to hold down shift and hit the key just above your enter or return. And that in all C-based languages like JavaScript and PHP and all sorts of other languages is the OR operator, this or what I'm about to type. And that is simply elements outside of x dot type equals number. So now we're, probably should push that down there. That's going to look a bit tidier. So we're looking for all text or number elements. And in that case, what are we going to do? We're going to say element outside of x dot value equals an empty string. Single quote, single quote. Okay, before we go and test that, I did notice that I've accidentally forgotten to put the S on the end of elements. Alright, elements outside of x instead of just element. So if I save that and I go and give that a test, we should get John Jones, 12 whatever street, good old Pippa. We'll go 4209. We'll go Joe Jones. We'll go somebody's been putting in rubbish. We'll add the friend and it should put it over there, and you'll notice that it's cleared out the form exactly the way we like. Notice when we clear out the form, all the placeholders come back into place, which is perfect as our prompts for those inputs. And if I click in there, I can start typing in, which is a bit annoying. So the last thing we want to do in our JavaScript is actually give this field focus again. And if you remember, that's why right at the top here, we got a reference to the field itself, not just its value. So now, down the bottom, straight after we do the clear the form, we can refocus it. And we simply do that by going name field dot focus. Focus is a function, so we need the brackets. And we're pretty much done. I'm just going to put a comment on this last line. Stop the form. Reloading the page, which is the default. Behavior forms. Look, the comments are actually really important in this because it does give you a set of notes that you can refer to if ever you're doing this sort of stuff in the future. Now what we're doing here, let's go back and do a final check. So John Jones has disappeared. We'll talk about that in a second. So let's put him back. John Jones, 12 whatever street. Suburb is going to be Peppermar. Postcode is going to be 409. We'll give him his email and his phone number back. And we'll get our friend over there. So now we're refocused, ready for the next person. So let's put in Betty 1313 Mockingbird Lane. You can tell me the reference. I'll be impressed. Ormo is 4208. Email is bboop at yahoo.com.au, and she only has a phone number at home, so we'll go 075543 1234. And we add her. You'll see it expands this list, puts in a second card, etc., etc. Like I said, the delete buttons won't work because we didn't tell them to. I can't add a blank friend because I have to at least put in a name, but I could actually just put in a name. So let's go for Mary Smart and just put a name in, and it will still do that. A bit messy with the address. We could play around with that all day. But our goal is not to do this in JavaScript, and the reason is none of this data has been saved anywhere. It literally just exists here on the screen, on the client side. If I refresh my address book, come back to it later, it clears out all my friends. And so what we want is a way to persist that data, to keep it over multiple reloads of the page, close it down, come back to it tomorrow, etc. And the best way to do that is server-side databases. And so our next video will deal with creating the database and then the PHP code in our last video to actually put it all together. So we've done quite a bit of work here in the JavaScript, but I think it's actually important for you to have a good handle on JavaScript. Hence the notes, and hence spending so much time on this. A little later on, when we go for PHP, of course, we'll actually delete all of this work. All right, that's it. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.